The light in the great conclave chamber was dying. It was not a sudden failure of technology, but a slow, entropic decay that mirrored the spirit of the Glypton race. Crystalline spires, grown over millennia to form the chamber's vaulted ceiling, now seemed to weep dust, their internal luminescence fading from a brilliant silver blue to a tired, defeated gray. The air itself felt heavy, thick with the silence of 1,000 unanswered prayers. Elder Kalen stood upon the central dais, his chiseled geological form seeming to bear the weight of ages. His multifaceted eyes, usually gleaming with the accumulated wisdom of his lineage, were clouded with a profound sorrow that resonated through the very stone beneath his feet. Before him, the assembled members of the High Conclave sat in their sculpted alcoves, their own forms a gallery of stoic despair. For cycles, they had watched the shroud advance. It was not a fleet, not an empire, but a phenomenon, a creeping, silent negation of reality that consumed star systems with the patient indifference of a tide. It did not burn or shatter, it simply erased. Light, matter, time, even memory itself seemed to unravel in its presence. The Glyptons, the eldest of the known races, the architects of the first star lanes and the authors of the Concord's founding charters, were being unwritten from the cosmic scroll. They had sent out the call of last resort, a plea for aid broadcast on every known frequency, carried on psionic waves, and even etched into the very fabric of spacetime, a desperate cry to the galactic community they had helped to nurture. The response had been a silence more profound and more terrifying than the shroud itself. The T-Corps, warriors who owed their ascension to Glypton patronage, had sealed their borders, citing a non-aggression pact with an unseen, ancient power. The Lumina, beings of pure energy, had simply withdrawn their consciousness from the physical plane, their shimmering nebulae forms winking out of existence along the Glypton frontier. The mechanistic Zil, in their cold, computational logic, had calculated the probability of contagion at 97% and had severed all diplomatic and physical contact. The Concord, the great galactic body of law and mutual defense, had issued a formal decree of quarantine, a political act that was, in truth, an execution order. Every race had abandoned them. The final courier probe has returned. Kalen's voice was a low, resonant grinding like stones shifting deep within the earth. It echoed in the vast, hollow space. The Voral hegemony sends its deepest regrets. They have invoked the clause of existential sovereignty. They will not intervene. A low murmur, a collective sigh of crushed hope, swept through the chamber. The Voral had been their last, most desperate hope. They were pragmatists, traitors, less bound by the Concord's rigid dogma. Their refusal was the final seal on the Glypton tomb. "Then it is as we feared," said Elder Thera, her form more slender and ancient than Kalen's, etched with the memory grooves of a dozen galactic ages. "We are alone. The archives must be prepared for temporal stasis. Our legacy, at least, must endure the coming dark." "A legacy is a memory," countered a younger Elder Vorn, his crystalline edges still sharp with a defiance that was quickly being eroded. "And what is memory to a universe that has forgotten us? A stone at the bottom of a dead ocean. We were the foundation upon which this galaxy built its civilization, and they leave us to be unmade, as if we were nothing more than a flawed inscription to be polished away." The bitterness in his voice was a raw, open wound. It was a sentiment they all shared. They were not warriors. Their power had always been in wisdom, in creation, in the patient shaping of civilizations. They had built bridges between stars and societies, and now, as their own world crumbled, they found every one of those bridges dismantled from the other side. They had taught the galaxy the meaning of community, only to be made the ultimate pariahs. It was then that the chamber's central crystal, a massive, flawless prism that served as their primary sensor and communications hub, chimed with a soft, unexpected tone. It was a sound no one had heard in decades, the alert for an unidentifiable, unlogged communication protocol. Every head, every multifaceted gaze turned toward it. A thread of light, thin and impossibly pure, coalesced within the crystal's heart. It was not a grand, encoded, conquered transmission. It was simple, direct, almost primitive in its construction. "Source," Kalen's voice was sharp, cutting through the despair. The chamber's lorekeeper, a stooped figure named Lix, interfaced with the crystal. His manipulators' delicate crystalline digits danced over the glowing surface. "Unknown, Elder, the vector originates from the void space beyond the Serpent's Nebula, a region marked as unexplored, cautionary. On all Concord charts, the race is unlisted. They call themselves humanity." The name meant nothing. It was a collection of alien phonemes, devoid of history or weight. Vorn scoffed, a grating sound of crystal on crystal. Scavengers, no doubt, circling our corpse before we have even expired. They smell our decay and come seeking forgotten technology from the Concord's outcasts. Their transmission protocol is unusual, Lix continued, his focus absolute. It carries no threat markers, no territorial claims or displays of power. It is a simple, tight beam signal, mathematical constants, a periodic table of elements, and a linguistic primer, followed by a message. It is concise. Kalen waited, his posture betraying none of the fragile hope that flickered within his ancient consciousness. Relay the message, Lore Keeper. The chamber fell silent once more. The single thread of light in the central crystal pulsed, and a voice filled the air. It was not synthetic, nor was it psionic. It was organic, layered with subtle harmonics the Glypton's universal translator struggled to fully interpret. It sounded calm, terribly calm. This is the United Nations Expeditionary Vessel Resolve. We are detecting a significant spatio-temporal anomaly encroaching upon your system. Our long-range sensors indicate a civilization under existential threat. Do you require assistance? The simplicity of it was disarming. It was a question direct and unambiguous. It held no preamble of titles, no recitation of diplomatic boilerplate, no veiled demands. It was a question a neighbor might ask upon seeing a house on fire. The conclave was stunned into a deeper silence. They had spent cycles broadcasting an epic saga of their despair across the galaxy, a final, desperate testament. The established powers had replied with complex legal and political justifications for their inaction. And from the dark, from a people they had never known existed, came a simple, four-word question. A trick, Vorn insisted, his voice rising. They are primitives who have stumbled upon a sensor echo they cannot comprehend. Or worse, they are agents of the Shroud itself, a new form of deception to lull us into lowering what little defense we have left. The Shroud does not communicate, Thera countered, her voice soft but firm. It consumes. This is something else, something unexpected. Kalen's gaze remained fixed on the pulsing light. Humanity! The name was still a void, but the message was a tangible thing. It was an offer, a hand extended from an unknown shore. After an eternity of unanswered pleas, any answer at all felt like a miracle, even one that might be a mirage. The risk was immense. To invite an unknown variable into their final moments could hasten their end, corrupt their archives, or bring a new form of horror upon them. But the alternative was the certainty of oblivion. The silence of the conquered had been a judgment. This new voice was a possibility. They are broadcasting from a single vessel, Lix reported, his digits still tracing the signal's path. Its energy signature is perplexing. It runs colder than the vacuum around it. Its drive systems are unlike anything in the Concord databases. It is a ghost, a whisper. A single ship. Against the Shroud, a force that had made entire fleets of Concord battle cruisers vanish without a trace. It was absurd. It was the hope of a fool. They offer help, Kalen said, his voice cutting through the rising tide of debate. The Zill offered calculations. The T-Corps offered platitudes. The Concord offered a quarantine. These humans, they offer help. We have spent our final energies appealing to the reason and honor of our known allies, and we have found none. Perhaps it is time to entertain the unknown. He turned his gaze from the crystal to the assembled elders. Open a channel, Lore Keeper. Let us speak to these humans. Let us look into the eyes of this last, improbable hope, and see if there is anything there but our own reflection. The conclave chamber, a tomb of fading light and abandoned dreams, held its collective breath. For the first time in an age, a decision was made that was not about preservation or remembrance, but about a future that was, until this moment, unthinkable. They would answer the call from the ghost in the void. The human ship, the Resolve, did not announce its arrival with a flash of light or a rupture in space-time. It simply appeared. One moment, the Glypton orbital sensors showed only the swirling, cancerous edge of the Shroud and the cold, indifferent stars. The next, a form was there, hanging in the void between the homeworld and its fading moon. It was a long, dark spear of a vessel, its hull a matte black that seemed to drink the very light of the distant nebula. There were no elegant curves, no crystalline flourishes, no grand displays of power or artistry. It was a thing of pure, brutal function. Its surface was a complex lattice of unfamiliar alloys and sensor arrays that seemed to watch in every direction at once. As the Glypton defense platforms tentatively scanned it, they returned readings that were a cascade of contradictions. The ship's mass was far greater than its size suggested. Its power core was almost silent, emitting less radiation than a dormant asteroid. Its defenses were not projected shields of energy, but something far more complex, localized distortions in spacetime that bent light and sensor waves around the hull, making it a flickering, uncertain silhouette. Elder Kalen watched the viewscreen from the command nexus of the Grand Archive, the most heavily fortified structure on the Glypton homeworld. Beside him stood Vorn, his earlier skepticism now tempered by a profound, unnerving curiosity. "It is a warship," Vorn stated, the words a low rumble. "Look at its design. There is no aspect of it that is not built for conflict. It is a predator." "Perhaps," Kalen replied, his gaze unblinking. "Or perhaps it is simply a tool built by a people who understand the universe is not always a place of gentle creation. The artisan uses a chisel, the surgeon uses a scalpel. Both are sharp. Their purpose defines them." The humans had requested a face-to-face meeting, not on their ship nor on the planet's surface. They had proposed a neutral point, a small, automated diplomatic station that had orbited the Glypton homeworld for centuries, unused since the last conquered dignitary had departed. They had shown a surprising and unsettling knowledge of Glypton customs, choosing a venue that signified neutrality and respect. It was a gesture of profound diplomatic acuity from a race that was, by all records, a ghost. Kalen had agreed. He, along with a small contingent of archive guards, made the journey to the station. The interior was Spartan, a relic of a more optimistic age. He stood in the central chamber, a circular room with a panoramic view of his world, a beautiful marble of blue and silver, now tragically besieged by the encroaching, formless gray of the shroud. He did not have to wait long. A single human transport, as stark and functional as its parent vessel, docked with the station. The airlock hissed open, and two figures emerged. They were smaller than he had expected. Bipedal, symmetrical, their forms encased in simple, dark gray environmental suits that seemed more practical than ceremonial. They moved with a quiet efficiency, their steps measured and confident. They stopped a respectful distance away, and their helmets retracted with a faint sigh of compressed air. Kalen's multifaceted eyes took in the face of the lead human. It was soft, fleshy, and remarkably expressive. The being was female by the nuances of her form. Her hair was dark, pulled back from a face that was pale and unadorned. But it was her eyes that held him. They were a deep, clear gray, and they held no fear, no arrogance, no avarice. They held a profound, unsettling calmness. It was the calm of a deep ocean hiding fathomless depths. "Elder Kalen," she said. Her voice was the same one from the transmission, clear and steady. The universal translator rendered her words perfectly, but it was the tone that Kalen focused on. It was a tone of absolute presence. "I am Ambassador Eva Rostova. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "Ambassador," Kalen inclined his head, a slow, deliberate gesture. "Your arrival is unexpected. Your people are not known to us. You are not signatories of the conquered. By what right or reason do you enter a quarantined system at the edge of annihilation?" Rostova's expression did not change. There was no offense taken, no defensive reaction. She simply absorbed the question, considered it, and then answered. "We have no right under conquered law, Elder. We are not bound by its statutes. As for our reason, we came because you called." "We called to our allies," Vorn interjected from beside Kalen, his voice sharp. "To the races who have shared 1,000 cycles of history with us. We did not call to you." Rostova's gaze shifted to Vorn. The calm in her eyes did not waver. "Your call was broadcast on all frequencies, on all mediums. It was a message of desperation, sent without prejudice into the void. We heard it. That is all that matters." "And what do you expect to do?" Vorn pressed, stepping forward. "Your single vessel against that." He gestured to the viewscreen where the shroud's tendrils seemed to writhe in slow, inexorable motion. "The combined fleets of the conquered judged this threat to be absolute. They have technology that can shatter moons, that can ignite stars, and they fled. What can you possibly offer?" This was the crux of it, the question that had haunted Kalen since their arrival. Were they fools, or were they something else entirely? Ambassador Rostova turned her gaze back to Kalen, bypassing Vorn as if he were a momentary distraction. She seemed to understand that the true dialogue was with him. "We do not offer a weapon, Elder. We offer a diagnosis. The conquered sees the shroud as a blight, a plague to be contained. They have analyzed its effects, and in their fear they have failed to analyze its nature. They treat the symptom, and so they have abandoned the patient." Kalen felt a subtle shift within his ancient consciousness. Her words were not those of a warrior, but of a scholar, a scientist. "You believe you understand the shroud." "We believe the conquered's understanding is incomplete. Rostova corrected gently. They define it as a hostile entity, a malevolent force. Our analysis suggests something different. It is not an invasion. It is a systemic failure, a breakdown in the fundamental laws of spacetime. It does not hate you. It is as unaware of you as an earthquake is of the city it levels. She gestured to her companion, a taller male who had remained silent until now. He produced a small, flat device and activated it. A holographic display bloomed in the air between them. It showed a complex, shifting latticework of light. Kalen recognized the base mathematics. It was a model of quantum foam, the theoretical substrate of reality. But the human model was more complex, more elegant than any Glypton physicist had ever conceived. Your region of space, Rostova explained, her finger tracing a path through the hologram, is suffering from what we term dimensional shear. The barrier between this reality and a higher-energy chaotic substrate is fraying. The shroud is not an entity crossing over. It is the raw, unstructured chaos of that substrate leaking through. It doesn't consume matter, it decouples it from the physical laws that give it form and persistence. It is, for lack of a better term, a cosmic solvent. Kalen and Vorn stared at the display. The Glypton scientists had theorized something similar, but had dismissed it as philosophical conjecture. They had lacked the observational power to prove it. The humans, it seemed, did not. "And you believe you can stop this leakage?" Kalen asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Stop it, no," Rostova said, and for a moment Kalen's hope fractured. To do so would require reinforcing the fabric of spacetime across this entire galactic sector. That is beyond our capability. It may be beyond any capability, but we do not need to stop it. We only need to divert it, to stabilize it, to create a localized bulwark around your system, a patch on the structure of reality itself. She gestured to the hologram again. The model shifted. A series of small, glowing nodes appeared, surrounding a single, stable point in the chaotic lattice. These nodes emitted harmonic frequencies that seemed to resonate with the fabric of the model, reinforcing it, making it cohere. The chaotic leakage was not eliminated, but it was now flowing around the stabilized point, like water around a stone. "Harmonic resonance emitters," Rostova said. "They are not weapons, they are tuning forks. We will align them to the specific frequency of this reality's quantum vibration. They will create a field of stability, a bastion of coherent physical law inside which your system can exist. The shroud will pass around you, not through you." The sheer audacity of the concept was staggering. It was not warfare. It was engineering on a scale that bordered on the divine, to manipulate the very foundation of reality as if it were a current to be dammed. "Why?" Vorn's voice was strained, his skepticism warring with a dawning sense of awe. "Why would you do this for us? What do you want in return? Our archives? Our technology? A place in a restored Concord?" Ambassador Rostova turned off the display. The room was once again filled with the dim light and the terrible view of the encroaching shroud. Her calm, gray eyes met Vorn's and then Kalen's. For the first time, a flicker of something other than placid analysis entered her expression. It was a deep, ancient sadness, a weariness that seemed to echo Kalen's own. "When we were a young species," she began, her voice low and soft, "barely capable of leaving our own solar system, we faced an extinction-level event. A stellar phenomenon we could not predict or control threatened to sterilize our homeworld. We had just made contact with the outer fringes of the galactic community. We were primitives, children crying in a vast, dark forest. We sent out a call for help, a plea for knowledge, for technology, for sanctuary, anything." She paused, and the silence in the room became heavy, freighted with a history Kalen had never known. "We broadcast our desperation to the stars, to the very races you now call allies. And from the grand and ancient civilizations of the galaxy, we received nothing, not a word, not an acknowledgement. Our plea was absorbed by the great, empty void. We were not important enough. We were not established enough. We were not worth the risk." Her gaze was fixed on Kalen, but it was as if she were looking through him, into a past that was still a raw, unhealed wound for her entire species. "We survived on our own, through desperation and ingenuity and a cost you cannot imagine. We clawed our way back from the brink, and we remembered. We remembered the silence. We remembered what it felt like to be abandoned, to be deemed unworthy of existence." She took a slow breath, her composure returning, but the memory of that ancient pain still lingered in her eyes. "We do not want your technology, Elder. We do not seek a place in your Concord. We are not here as saviors or conquerors. We are here because we heard a voice crying in the dark, and we remember what it is to be that voice. Every race abandoned you. We will not. We asked for allies, we got silence. We will not be that silence for another. The words struck Kalen with the force of a physical blow. It was the title of their own sorrow, the final, tragic summation of their existence, spoken back to them by a stranger from the void. But in her mouth, it was not an epitaph. It was a creed, a statement of purpose born from a shared trauma that transcended species, that bridged the gulf of unknown stars and unknown histories. Humanity was not here because of what they could gain. They were here because of what they had lost. Vorn was speechless. His rigid, defiant posture had collapsed. He looked at the human ambassador not as a potential threat, but as a kindred spirit, a fellow survivor of the galaxy's profound indifference. Kalen finally understood. The human ship was not a warship, it was a lifeboat. The humans were not warriors, they were guardians. Their calm was not arrogance, it was resolve. Their logic was not cold, it was the focused, determined application of empathy. They had looked into the abyss of extinction and had not been consumed by it. They had been forged by it. "You will have our full cooperation, Ambassador Rostova," Kalen said, his voice resonating with a conviction he had not felt in centuries. "Show us what must be done." The operation began not with the thunder of weapons, but with the quiet hum of immense unfolding machinery. The resolve did not engage the shroud directly. Instead, it moved to a series of precise Lagrange points around the Glypton star, its dark hull a stark contrast to the brilliant, besieged light. From its cavernous bays, it deployed the emitters. They were not large, but they were complex, intricate devices that unfurled like metallic blossoms, their inner workings a dizzying array of resonating crystals and conduits that pulsed with a soft blue light. Glypton science vessels, their own crystalline forms looking almost fragile next to the stark human technology, moved in careful, coordinated patterns, taking readings, providing localized energy, and acting as relays. For the first time, a Glypton was allowed aboard the human vessel. Kalen had sent his most brilliant astrophysicist, a young prodigy named Phelan. His reports back to the Conclave were a mixture of awe and profound intellectual shock. The human ship was a masterpiece of pragmatic engineering. There were no wasted spaces, no ceremonial chambers. Every corridor, every bulkhead was designed for maximum efficiency and resilience. The crew moved with a silent, focused grace, their actions precise, their communication concise. They were a single, integrated organism dedicated to the task at hand. Phelan described the bridge of the Resolve as a place of profound quiet. There were no shouted orders, no frantic alerts, just the soft chime of data streams and the low, calm voices of the human officers. Ambassador Rostova was there, overseeing the operation alongside a stern-faced captain whose presence radiated an aura of absolute command. They watched the universe not on view screens, but on vast, three-dimensional holographic displays that showed the flow of spacetime itself, the raw data of reality rendered as a flowing river of light and shadow. "They do not see the universe as we do, Elder," Phelan had transmitted, his voice filled with a reverence that bordered on worship. "We see stars and planets, matter and energy. They see the underlying code. They are not just navigating space, they are editing it." The deployment of the emitters was a slow, deliberate process, a celestial ballet of immense gravitational and quantum forces. Each emitter had to be placed with microscopic precision, its frequency tuned to a billionth of a decimal to harmonize with the others. The humans worked with a patience that was both terrifying and beautiful. They made no mistakes. They did not rush. They were as inexorable in their solution as the shroud was in its advance. Kalen and the Conclave watched from the Grand Archive as the final emitter was brought online. On the main display, they saw the human representation of the shroud, a churning, chaotic sea of red static. Then, as the emitters activated in sequence, a network of brilliant blue lines appeared, forming a perfect geodesic sphere around their solar system. The blue lines pulsed in unison, a single, pure, resonant tone that was felt not in the ears, but deep within the very structure of their crystalline bodies. And then the impossible happened. The red static, the formless chaos of the shroud, began to part. It did not retreat or shatter. It flowed. The edge of the consuming void, which had advanced for so long without check, now met the blue sphere of stability and diverted, its tendrils wrapping around the field of coherent reality before continuing on into the void. Starlight, pure and undiluted, began to shine through the thinning veil. Stars that had not been seen in a generation reappeared in the Glypton sky, their ancient light a balm on a wounded world. A collective exhalation, A sound of a million souls releasing a breath they had held for an eternity, swept across the planet. In the conclave chamber, the ancient crystal at its center flared with a renewed, brilliant silver-blue light, as if taking its first deep drink of a restored cosmos. Elders who had sat in stoic silence for years let out low, resonant chimes of joy. The human solution had worked. They had not defeated the Shroud. They had, in their own words, patched the universe. They had built an island of order in a sea of chaos. Ambassador Rostova appeared on the main view screen, her face as calm in victory as it had been in introduction. Elder Kalen, the resonance field is stable. Our projections indicate it will hold indefinitely, so long as the emitters remain powered. Your system is secure. Ambassador, Kalen began, but words failed him. Gratitude felt too small a concept for what had transpired. You have given us back our sky. You have given us back our future. How can we ever? There is no debt, Elder, Rostova said, her voice gentle. We did what was necessary. We are all adrift in the same dark. The only way to survive it is to be a light for one another. It was a simple philosophy, yet it was more powerful than any weapon, more profound than any conquered charter. It was in this moment of shared triumph, of profound relief, that the true twist of their fate was revealed. Ambassador, a new voice cut in. It was the human captain of the Resolve. His face appeared in a smaller window on the screen. His expression was no longer calm. It was one of intense, focused alarm. We are detecting a residual signal. It's coming from inside the Shroud. A reflection from the emitters? Rostova asked, her focus instantly shifting. Negative, the captain replied, his voice taut. This is not an echo, it's structured, coherent. It was being drowned out by the chaotic noise of the dimensional shear. Now that the field is stabilized, we can hear it clearly. It's old, impossibly old. On the main screen, the display shifted. It now showed a complex waveform, a signal of staggering complexity and perfect regularity. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was a message. Phelan, still aboard the Resolve, began to work alongside the human science officers, his crystalline digits flying across a holographic interface. The combined intellect of the two species, one ancient and wise, the other young and preternaturally gifted, focused on the enigma. The signal was not a distress call. It was not a warning. It was, the translators finally determined, a key, a sequence of mathematical and quantum state data that acted as a lock. The Shroud, Phelan's voice crackled over the comm, filled with a dawning horror and awe. The dimensional shear, it wasn't a natural event. The energy signatures, the decay patterns, they are too uniform, it's artificial. The silence that followed this pronouncement was heavier than any that had come before. Artificial, Kalen repeated, the word feeling alien in his mouth. The Shroud is not a hole in the universe, Rostova said, her gray eyes wide with the implications of the data scrolling past her. It's a cage, a containment field, a prison of unimaginable scale built by an intelligence that could manipulate the fabric of reality itself, and it's failing. The leakage we detected wasn't the prison breaking down. It was the effect of the lock beginning to disengage. The human emitters, the harmonic resonance field that had saved the Glypton race, had not patched a hole. They had stabilized the lock. They had, inadvertently, quieted the storm just enough to hear the sound of the prisoner rattling the bars from within. The captain's voice was grim. Ambassador Phelan, we've managed to partially decrypt the outer layers of the signal. It's not just a key, it's a designation, a name. A sequence of alien symbols, rendered in the stark, functional script of the human interface, appeared on the screen. It was a word that meant nothing to Kalen, yet he felt a primal, instinctual dread crawl through his stone form. What is it? He asked. What does it mean? Rostova looked from the screen to Kalen, her face a mask of profound gravity. The calm was gone, replaced by the terrible certainty of a much larger, much more terrifying truth. It's a warning label, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Left by whoever built the cage. The signal isn't coming from the prisoner, it's coming from the lock itself. It's a status report. The final layer of the decryption resolved. The alien symbols were replaced by a single, chilling line of translated text. Containment field integrity at 0.01%. Entity designated, the first silence is stirring. Protocol of universal reset is now active. Flee. The conclave chamber was silent. The restored light from the central crystal seemed to dim as if in fear. The returned stars outside the viewport no longer looked like beacons of hope, but like distant, silent witnesses to a horror about to be reborn. They had feared the shroud, a mindless, consuming void, but the shroud was not the threat. It was the shield, a shield that had protected the galaxy for untold eons and which was now about to fail. Kalen looked at the face of Ambassador Rostova on the screen. He saw his own dawning terror reflected in her human eyes. They had faced the abyss of abandonment, and together they had overcome it. They had reached out across the void and found not an ally but a mirror of their own will to survive. But in solving their own extinction, they had stumbled upon the key to a much greater one. The silence of the conquered had been born of fear and politics, but the first silence. That was a name that promised a finality from which there could be no appeal. He looked away from the screen, toward the panoramic view of his saved world, a tiny, fragile island of reality in an ocean of cosmic dread. They were not alone anymore. Humanity had come, but they had not come at the end of the story. They had arrived just in time for the beginning of a much older and much darker one. And now two races, one ancient and weary, the other young and resolute, stood together on the precipice, staring into a darkness that was no longer empty, but was instead about to open its eyes. The fight for the Glypton homeworld was over. The fight for reality itself had just begun.